The gunshot split the winter air just as Harrison Ford stepped out of his cabin in the Montana wilderness, his breath forming clouds in the frigid December morning of 1876. He had been living alone on this patch of land outside the small settlement of Hamilton for 3 years, tending cattle and keeping to himself after the war had taken everything from him except his life and his will to keep moving forward. The crack of the rifle echoed through the pine trees, followed by shouting in a language he did not understand, and then silence that felt heavier than the snow beginning to fall from the gray sky above. Harrison grabbed his rifle from inside the door and moved carefully through the trees toward where the sounds had originated. His boots crunched through the crusty snow, each step deliberate and quiet as he had learned during his time as a scout. The forest opened into a small clearing where he saw tracks, lots of them, and blood in the snow. Someone had been hurt, and recently. He followed the trail, his instincts telling him to turn back but his conscience pushing him forward. He found her collapsed against a fallen log, her dark hair matted with snow and blood, her deerskin dress torn and stained. She was young, maybe 20 years old, and her face was pale from cold and pain. A bullet had grazed her shoulder, leaving an angry red wound that bled steadily onto the white ground. Her eyes flickered open as he approached, wide with fear and defiance despite her obvious weakness. "I am not going to hurt you," Harrison said, holding his hands up to show he meant no harm. He did not know if she understood English, but he kept his voice calm and steady. "You are hurt. Let me help you." She tried to speak, but her teeth chattered too violently. Her lips were turning blue, and Harrison knew she would not survive long in this cold. He made a decision quickly, shrugging off his thick coat and wrapping it around her shoulders before lifting her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and she did not have the strength to fight him as he carried her back toward his cabin. The walk felt longer than it should have, with the wind picking up and the snow falling harder. By the time he kicked open his cabin door, his arms ached and his face stung from the cold. He laid her on his bed, the only bed in the single-room cabin, and immediately began stoking the fire in the stone fireplace until flames roared and heat began to fill the space. He heated water and gathered clean cloth, moving with practiced efficiency. During the war, he had seen enough wounds to know how to tend them. He approached her carefully, speaking softly as he cleaned the wound on her shoulder. She flinched, but did not cry out, watching him with dark eyes that held a mixture of suspicion and exhausted gratitude. "My name is Harrison," he said as he worked, wrapping the wound with clean bandages. "Harrison Ford. This is my cabin. You are safe here." She said something in her own language, her voice weak but melodic despite the circumstances. He wished he understood, but he could only offer her a small smile and continue his work. Once her shoulder was bandaged, he covered her with every blanket he owned and brought her water to drink. She sipped it slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. Over the next few hours, as the storm outside intensified into a full blizzard, Harrison busied himself around the cabin. He made a thin soup from dried beef and vegetables, hoping she would be able to eat something. He checked her wound regularly, relieved to see that the bleeding had stopped. She drifted in and out of sleep, sometimes muttering words he could not understand, sometimes watching him with that same wary but curious expression. By evening, the storm had trapped them completely. Snow piled against the cabin walls, and the wind howled like wolves outside. Harrison sat in his chair near the fire, his rifle across his lap more from habit than any sense of immediate danger. She was awake now, propped up on the pillows, looking stronger than she had that morning. "Can you understand me?" he asked, gesturing to himself and then to her. "Harrison, you." She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Crescent," she said, her English accented but clear. "My name is Crescent Lightfoot." Relief flooded through him. "You speak English." "The missionaries," she said, her voice still weak but growing stronger. "They taught many of us. I learned as a girl." She touched her bandaged shoulder gingerly. "Why did you help me?" "You needed help," Harrison said simply. "What happened to you?" Her face darkened, and she looked toward the window where snow obscured any view. "Soldiers. They attacked our winter camp without warning. They were looking for warriors who raided a supply train, but those warriors were from a different band. They did not care. They shot anyone who moved." Her voice broke slightly. "I ran. I got separated from my people in the confusion. I have been trying to find my way back for 2 days." Harrison felt anger rise in his chest, the same anger he had felt during the war when he witnessed senseless violence. "I am sorry that happened to you. You are a white man," Crescent said, not accusatory but simply stating a fact. "Why would you care?" "Because I have seen enough killing to last a lifetime," Harrison replied. "And because right and wrong do not change based on the color of a person's skin, though plenty of folks seem to think otherwise." She regarded him with new interest, some of the wariness fading from her eyes. "You are different from most white men I have met." "I would hope so," he said, offering her a bowl of soup. "You should eat something. You need your strength." Crescent accepted the bowl and ate slowly, clearly hungry despite her injuries. Harrison prepared his own meal, and they ate in a companionable silence, the storm raging outside while warmth and safety filled the cabin. He found himself watching her, noting the graceful way she moved despite her pain, the intelligence in her eyes, the proud set of her shoulders even while injured and vulnerable. "How long have you lived here alone?" she asked, breaking the silence. 3 years, Harrison answered. "I came west after the war ended, needed to get away from all the memories back east." "The war between your people," Crescent said. "We heard about it. Brothers fighting brothers." "Something like that," Harrison said, not wanting to delve into those painful memories. "I was on the side that one, but it did not feel like winning. Just felt like everybody lost something." "I understand," Crescent said softly. "My people have been at war for as long as I can remember, fighting to keep our lands, our way of life. We lose more every year." They talked late into the night, sharing stories of their lives, their losses, their hopes. Harrison learned that Crescent was part of a Lakota band that had been pushed steadily westward by expansion and broken treaties. She had a brother named Running Wolf, who was a respected warrior and leader among their people. Her parents had died from sickness that swept through their camp 5 winters ago, leaving her and her brother to care for each other. In turn, Harrison told her about his family farm in Pennsylvania, how his father and 2 brothers had died in the war, how his mother passed shortly after from a broken heart. He explained his decision to head west, to find land where he could build something new and try to leave the ghosts of the past behind. "You are still haunted," Crescent observed, her dark eyes seeing more than he intended to reveal. "Aren't we all?" Harrison replied. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. The storm continued for 3 days straight, making travel impossible. Harrison slept on the floor near the fire while Crescent recovered in his bed. Her wound healed cleanly, and her strength returned quickly. She helped around the cabin as much as she could, insisting on earning her keep despite his protests. Harrison found himself enjoying her company more than he had enjoyed anyone's in years. She was intelligent and funny, with a dry wit that caught him off guard and made him laugh in ways he had forgotten he could. She taught him words in Lakota, and he helped her improve her English. They cooked together, traded stories, and slowly the walls they both kept around their hearts began to crack. On the 4th day, the storm broke. Brilliant sunshine reflected off the fresh snow, nearly blinding in its intensity. Crescent stood at the window, looking out at the transformed landscape, and Harrison saw sadness in her expression. "You want to find your people," he said, coming to stand beside her. "I need to let them know I am alive," she said. "My brother will be worried. He will be searching for me." "I will help you," Harrison offered. "When you are strong enough to travel, I will take you to find your band." She turned to him, surprise evident on her face. "You would do that? It could be dangerous. My people may not trust you." "I trust you," Harrison said. "And if you vouch for me, maybe that will be enough." Something shifted between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. Crescent reached out and touched his hand, her fingers warm against his skin. "Thank you, Harrison Ford. You are a good man." His heart hammered in his chest at her touch, at the way she said his name. He had not felt this way about anyone since before the war, had not allowed himself to feel anything at all for so long. But Crescent had awakened something in him, brought warmth back to places that had been frozen. "We should wait a few more days," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "Make sure you are fully healed and the trails are passable." She nodded, but her hand remained on his for a moment longer before she pulled away. The air between them felt charged, filled with things neither of them quite dared to say yet. Over the next week, as Crescent's strength fully returned, they grew closer. Harrison taught her to play cards, and she taught him to braid leather into intricate patterns. They went for short walks around the cabin, and she showed him how to read tracks in the snow that he would have missed on his own. In the evenings, they sat by the fire and talked, sometimes for hours, about everything and nothing. One night, as they sat closer than usual, Crescent spoke about her dreams. "Before the soldiers came, I was hoping for a different life. My brother wanted me to marry Strong Bear, a warrior from our band. He is brave and respected, but I do not love him. I wanted to choose my own path, my own heart." "What does your heart want?" Harrison asked, though he thought he might know the answer, hoped he knew it. "I do not know any more," Crescent said, but her eyes told a different story as she looked at him. "Everything has changed. I have changed." Harrison took a risk, reaching out to tuck a strand of her long dark hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek and she leaned into the touch. "Some changes are good," he said softly. "Some changes are impossible," she whispered, but she did not pull away. "My people need me. My brother needs me. I cannot abandon them, no matter what my heart wants." "I would never ask you to," Harrison said, though the thought of her leaving, of never seeing her again, felt like a knife to his chest. "But maybe there is a way for you to have both, your people and your heart." "You do not understand," Crescent said, pulling back slightly. "The gulf between our worlds is too wide. My people are at war with yours. There is no future for us, Harrison. There cannot be." "Then we will make one," he said with a determination that surprised even himself. "I know it will not be easy. I know there will be people on both sides who will hate it. But Crescent, I have not felt alive since before the war, until you walked into my life, or rather, until I carried you into it." She laughed despite the tears shining in her eyes. "You are a fool, Harrison Ford." "Probably," he agreed. "But I am a fool who is falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw and terrifying. Crescent stared at him for a long moment, and then she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Crescent rested her forehead against his. "I am falling in love with you too," she confessed, "but I am also terrified of what that means." "So am I," Harrison admitted, "but we will figure it out together." They spent that night wrapped in each other's arms, talking about possibilities and dreams, about the challenges they would face and how they might overcome them. Harrison proposed that they find her people, explain the situation, and ask for permission to court her properly. If her brother and band agreed, he would do whatever was necessary to prove himself worthy, to bridge the divide between their worlds. Crescent was less optimistic but willing to try. "Running Wolf is protective of me," she warned. "He may not react well. And if Strong Bear is with him, there could be trouble." "I can handle trouble," Harrison said, though he hoped it would not come to that. 2 days later they set out on horseback. Harrison had 2 horses and Crescent was an expert rider despite her recent injury. They traveled northeast, following trails and signs that Crescent recognized, searching for where her band might have relocated after the attack. The journey took 4 days. They camped each night under the stars, huddled close for warmth, talking and laughing and stealing kisses when the mood struck them. Harrison had never been happier, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead. Crescent seemed lighter too, as though allowing herself to love him had lifted some of the weight she carried. On the 4th day, they found the camp. It was nestled in a protected valley with good access to water and game. Smoke rose from multiple tippies, and Harrison could see people moving about their daily tasks. As they approached, however, a group of warriors rode out to meet them, weapons ready. Crescent called out in Lakota, identifying herself, and the warriors lowered their weapons in shock and relief. They surrounded her, speaking rapidly in their language, clearly overjoyed that she was alive. Then their attention turned to Harrison, and the mood shifted. Hands moved back toward weapons, faces hardened with suspicion. A tall warrior pushed through the group, and even before Crescent spoke his name, Harrison knew this was Running Wolf. The family resemblance was clear in the strong features and dark eyes. But where Crescent's eyes held warmth and openness, her brother's held only cold fury as he looked at Harrison. Crescent dismounted and ran to embrace her brother, speaking quickly in Lakota. Running Wolf held her tight, relief evident on his face, but his eyes never left Harrison. After a long exchange, Running Wolf finally spoke in English, his accent thicker than his sister's but his words clear enough. "You are the one who sheltered my sister." "I am," Harrison said, remaining on his horse but keeping his hands visible and away from his weapons. "She was hurt. I helped her heal. And now you bring her back expecting what? Gratitude? Reward?" Running Wolf's hand rested on the knife at his belt. "I expect nothing," Harrison said calmly, "except perhaps the chance to speak with you and your people about matters that concern your sister's future." This caused a stir among the gathered warriors. Crescent spoke urgently to her brother, gesturing between Harrison and herself. Running Wolf's expression grew darker, more dangerous. He barked orders, and suddenly Harrison was surrounded, pulled from his horse and his weapons taken. "Wait!" Crescent shouted, trying to push through to him, but Running Wolf held her back. "He has bewitched you," Running Wolf said to his sister, still speaking English so Harrison could understand. "Poisoned your mind while you were vulnerable. He saved my life." Crescent argued, struggling against her brother's hold. "And I love him. I choose him." "You do not know what you are saying," Running Wolf said, but there was pain in his voice now, hurt beneath the anger. "Strong Bear has been mourning you, preparing to go to war to avenge your death. And you returned speaking of love for a white man." "I never wanted Strong Bear," Crescent said, her voice firm despite the tears streaming down her face. "I never promised him anything. Harrison is a good man, Running Wolf. Please just talk to him. Listen to what he has to say." The camp had gathered now, dozens of people watching the confrontation. An older man stepped forward, wearing the marks of a chief or elder. He spoke in Lakota, and Running Wolf responded, clearly explaining the situation. The elder studied Harrison for a long moment, then gestured for him to be brought forward. Harrison stood before the elder, meeting his gaze with respect but not submission. The elder spoke in Lakota and Crescent translated, her voice shaking. He asks why you risk your life to come here. Why you did not simply send me back and forget about me. Because I love your sister, Harrison said, speaking directly to the elder even though he needed Crescent to translate. Because she is brave and kind and strong, and because a life without her is not a life I want to live. I know I am an outsider. I know my people have done terrible things to yours, but I am asking for a chance to prove that I am not my people's sins. I am just a man who loves a woman and wants to build a life with her. As Crescent translated, Harrison watched the elder's face. The old man's expression remained neutral, giving nothing away. When she finished, the elder spoke again, longer this time. He says that love is not enough, Crescent translated, her voice breaking. He says that in times of war there is no room for bridges between enemies. He says that I am needed here, that my people cannot spare me to live in the white world. I am not asking her to live in my world, Harrison said quickly. I will live in yours. I will learn your ways, earn my place among you. I have skills that could be useful. I can hunt, I can fight, I can work. Whatever you need me to do to prove myself, I will do it. This caused murmuring among the gathered people. The elder looked surprised, and even Running Wolf seemed taken aback. Another discussion followed in Lakota, multiple voices joining in, debating and arguing. Harrison stood still, barely breathing, praying that they would give him a chance. Finally, the elder spoke again, and this time there was something different in his tone. Crescent's face showed hope as she translated. He says that your offer is unusual. Most white men want to take from us, not join us. He says that if you are serious, you must prove yourself over the winter. You will live with us, work alongside our men, learn our language and customs. If by spring you have shown that you are worthy and that your intentions are true, he will consider allowing you to marry me. Relief flooded through Harrison so intensely his knees nearly buckled. Tell him I agree. Tell him thank you for this chance. But Running Wolf stepped forward, his face still hard. I do not agree with this. He is a white man. He cannot be trusted. Brother, please, Crescent said, turning to face him. Give him this chance. If he fails, if he proves unworthy, I will accept it. But let him try. Running Wolf and his sister stared at each other for a long moment, a silent battle of wills. Finally, Running Wolf looked away first, but his expression remained troubled. Fine, but I will be watching him. One mistake, one sign that he is not what he claims, and I will kill him myself. Fair enough, Harrison said, meeting Running Wolf's eyes. I would expect nothing less from a brother protecting his sister. The tension broke slightly, and the elder gave orders. Harrison's weapons were returned, though he was assigned to stay in a tipi with several young warriors who were clearly tasked with watching him. Crescent was taken to stay with the women, and Harrison did not see her again for the rest of that day. The first weeks were the hardest Harrison had ever experienced. Everything was different from what he knew. The language was complex and difficult to master. The customs sometimes seemed contradictory to his own understanding, and the work was constant and demanding. He was given the tasks usually reserved for young boys just learning to be men, which some of the warriors clearly found amusing. He endured the mockery and the suspicion, working harder than anyone else, determined to prove himself. He rose before dawn and worked until after dark. He practiced the language constantly, earning patient help from some of the elders and children, if not from the warriors his own age. He learned to tan hides, to track game in ways he had never imagined, to read weather and seasons in the land itself. Crescent watched from a distance, and occasionally they were allowed to speak briefly in the presence of others. Her encouragement kept him going during the darkest moments when he wondered if this was all a fool's errand. Running Wolf was his harshest critic. The warrior seemed determined to find fault in everything Harrison did. He pushed him harder than anyone else, gave him the most difficult tasks, and never offered a word of praise or encouragement. Harrison understood it for what it was. Running Wolf was testing him, trying to break him, to prove that he was not worthy of Crescent. One frozen morning in January, about 6 weeks after Harrison had joined the camp, everything changed. A hunting party was being organized to track a herd of elk spotted to the north. Harrison was included, though he suspected it was only because Running Wolf wanted to watch him fail in front of the other men. They rode out before dawn, a group of 10 warriors plus Harrison. The tracking was difficult, the elk wary and the terrain treacherous with ice and hidden ravines. They pursued the herd for hours, and Harrison kept pace with the best of them, his years of experience as a scout serving him well. When they finally cornered the herd in a narrow canyon, the hunt began in earnest. Harrison had been given a bow, as firearms would scatter the herd too quickly, and he had spent weeks practicing with the weapon despite his initial clumsiness. Now, as a massive bull elk broke from the herd and charged past him, he drew and released in one smooth motion. The arrow flew true, taking the elk in the heart. The animal ran another 20 yards before collapsing. A clean, merciful kill. The warriors whooped and celebrated, and for the first time, Harrison saw something other than hostility in their eyes when they looked at him. But the celebration was cut short by a shout from the canyon entrance. Harrison turned to see 3 riders approaching fast, and from their clothing and weapons, he could tell they were not from this band. The leader, a large warrior with a scarred face, rode straight toward them, and Harrison saw Running Wolf's expression darken. The newcomers spoke rapidly in Lakota, and Harrison caught enough words to understand that they were demanding something, that they were angry. The leader, who was called Strong Bear, Harrison realized with sinking dread, pointed at him and then toward the camp, his voice rising in fury. "He knows about you," Running Wolf said to Harrison in English. "He knows you wish to marry Crescent. He has come to challenge you." "I will not fight him," Harrison said. "This is not his decision to make. Crescent has chosen. Among our people, any warrior may challenge for the right to court an unmarried woman," Running Wolf explained, and for the first time, there was something almost like sympathy in his voice. "Especially one who was promised, even informally, to another. Strong Bear has the right to challenge you. If you refuse, you will be seen as a coward, and the elders will never allow you to marry Crescent." Harrison's mind raced. He looked at Strong Bear, who was larger and clearly experienced in this kind of combat. But Harrison had fought in a war, had survived countless battles. He was not the same man he had been before. "What are the rules?" he asked. "No weapons. Fight until one cannot continue or yields," Running Wolf said. "Sometimes these fights end quickly. Sometimes they do not end until one man is dead." Harrison nodded slowly, then turned to face Strong Bear. In careful Lakota, piecing together the words he had learned, he said, "I accept your challenge." Strong Bear smiled, a cruel expression, and dismounted. The other warriors formed a circle, and Harrison stepped into it. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. He thought of Crescent, of the life they could have together, and he knew he would not yield. The fight began with Strong Bear charging like a buffalo, trying to use his size and strength to overwhelm Harrison quickly. But Harrison had not survived the war by being stupid. He dodged to the side, letting Strong Bear's momentum carry him past, and landed a quick strike to the warrior's kidneys as he passed. Strong Bear roared with rage and pain. spinning faster than Harrison expected. His fist caught Harrison in the jaw, snapping his head back and filling his mouth with blood. Harrison stumbled but kept his feet, circling, waiting for the next attack. They fought for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Strong Bear was powerful, each of his blows like being hit with a sledgehammer. But Harrison was faster, more tactical, using his opponent's anger against him. He dodged and weaved, landing strikes when he could, taking hits when he had to, refusing to go down. Blood poured from his nose and a cut above his eye. His ribs ached where Strong Bear had landed a devastating body shot. But he could see that his opponent was tiring too, breathing hard, moving slower. One of Harrison's strikes had opened a cut on Strong Bear's forehead, and blood ran into his eyes. The end came suddenly. Strong Bear charged again, and this time Harrison was ready. He stepped into the charge instead of away from it, dropping low and using Strong Bear's own momentum to flip him over his shoulder. The big warrior crashed to the ground hard, the air driven from his lungs. Before he could recover, Harrison was on top of him, forearm pressed across his throat, not enough to choke but enough to show he could if he wanted to. "Yield," Harrison said in Lakota, the word clear despite his swollen mouth. Strong Bear struggled for a moment, then went still. Harrison saw the defeat in his eyes, the acceptance. "I yield," the warrior gasped. Harrison immediately released him and stood, offering his hand to help Strong Bear up. For a moment, he thought the warrior would refuse, but then Strong Bear took his hand and allowed himself to be pulled to his feet. There was something like respect in his eyes now, beneath the anger and disappointment. The watching warriors erupted in shouts and calls. Harrison swayed on his feet, exhausted and in pain, but he had won. He had proven himself in a way that transcended words or intentions. He had fought for Crescent and won. Running Wolf approached him, and for the first time since they had met, there was no hostility in his expression. "You fought well," he said simply. "With honor." "Thank you," Harrison managed, spitting blood onto the snow. They returned to camp with the elk they had killed, and news of the fight spread quickly. By the time Harrison had cleaned his wounds and changed his blood-soaked shirt, it seemed everyone knew what had happened. The atmosphere in the camp had shifted. People nodded to him as he passed, and the children stared at him with wide, curious eyes instead of suspicion. Crescent found him outside his tipi as the sun was setting. She took one look at his battered face and burst into tears. "You foolish, wonderful man," she said, gently touching the bruises on his face. "You could have been killed." "But I was not," Harrison said, wincing as her fingers found a particularly tender spot. "And now nobody can say I did not fight for you." "Nobody ever could," she said, kissing him softly, carefully avoiding his split lip. "You have been fighting for me since the day you found me." That night, the elder called for Harrison to come to the council tipi. Crescent accompanied him, as did Running Wolf. Inside, the elder sat with several other respected members of the band, their faces thoughtful in the firelight. The elder spoke, and Crescent translated. "He says that you have proven yourself beyond what he expected. You have worked hard, learned our ways, shown respect for our people and customs. And today, you fought with honor for what you love. He says that while winter is not yet over, he believes he has seen enough. If Running Wolf agrees, as head of your family, he will bless your marriage to Crescent." All eyes turned to Running Wolf. Harrison held his breath, waiting. Crescent's brother stared at him for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I was wrong about you," Running Wolf said in English, speaking directly to Harrison. "I thought you were like other white men, only taking, only destroying. But you have given up your world to join ours. You have worked without complaint and fought with honor." My sister loves you and I can see why. You have my blessing, Harrison Ford, and more than that, you have my respect. Harrison felt emotion well up in his chest, nearly choking him. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. That means more to me than you know. The elder smiled, the first real smile Harrison had seen on his face, and spoke again. Crescent's voice was joyful as she translated. He says we may be married in 3 days when the moon is full. It is a good time for new beginnings. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Harrison was taught the customs and responsibilities of a Lakota husband, while Crescent worked with the women preparing her wedding dress and gathering the items needed for the ceremony. The entire camp buzzed with excitement, and even those who had been most skeptical of Harrison seemed caught up in the celebration. The night before the wedding, Running Wolf came to speak with Harrison privately. They walked away from the camp, into the quiet of the winter forest, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. I want you to understand something, Running Wolf said. The life you are choosing will not be easy. Our people are being pushed harder every year. There will be more fighting, more loss. White soldiers do not distinguish between warriors and those who wish only to live in peace. You will be seen as a traitor by your people, and always as an outsider by some of mine. Are you certain this is what you want? I am certain I want Crescent, Harrison said. Everything else, we will face together. Running Wolf nodded slowly. Then I will tell you what I told her when she first spoke of you. Love is a powerful thing, but it is not always enough. You must also have respect, trust, and commitment. You must be willing to sacrifice, to compromise, to fight for each other, even when it is hard. Can you promise me that? I can, Harrison said. And I do. Then welcome to the family, brother, Running Wolf said, and pulled Harrison into an embrace that was both fierce and genuine. The wedding took place under a brilliant full moon that turned the snow-covered landscape into something magical. Crescent wore a white doeskin dress, decorated with intricate beadwork and quillwork that had taken months to create. Her hair was braided with sacred sage, and she looked so beautiful that Harrison forgot to breathe when he first saw her. The ceremony was conducted in Lakota, with the elder speaking the ancient words that bound them together. Harrison understood enough to know when to respond, and Crescent's hand in his felt like the only real thing in the world. They exchanged gifts, as was the custom, and Harrison gave her a necklace he had spent weeks making from silver coins he had melted down, forming them into the shape of a crescent moon. When the elder pronounced them married, the camp erupted in celebration. There was feasting and dancing and singing that lasted late into the night. Harrison danced with his new wife, laughing as she tried to teach him the steps, holding her close when the dancing slowed and became more intimate. Finally, late into the night, they retired to the tipi that had been prepared for them, decorated with wedding gifts from the entire band. Alone at last, they came together with love and passion, beginning their married life in the most intimate way possible. The winter passed, and spring arrived with melting snow and budding trees. Harrison and Crescent settled into married life, finding joy in the simple routines of daily existence. Harrison continued to learn and grow in his understanding of Lakota ways, and Crescent taught him everything she knew about her people's history and beliefs. But Running Wolf's warning proved prophetic. As winter gave way to spring, news reached them of increased military presence in the territory. More forts were being built, more soldiers arriving, more pressure being applied to force the Lakota onto reservations. The band held councils debating what to do. Some wanted to fight, to resist with everything they had. Others argued for negotiation, for finding a way to coexist. Harrison attended these councils, as was his right as a member of the band. But he mostly listened, understanding that his voice as a relative newcomer carried less weight than others. Crescent grew round with child as spring turned to summer, and Harrison found new reasons to hope despite the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The thought of becoming a father filled him with joy and terror in equal measure. One hot day in July, a group of riders approached the camp flying a white flag. They were led by a cavalry officer, a young lieutenant who looked nervous to be surrounded by Lakota warriors. He requested a parley with the band's leaders, and the elder agreed. Harrison attended the meeting, standing behind Running Wolf, and his stomach sank as he listened to the lieutenant read orders from his commander. The band was being ordered to report to a reservation by the end of August, or be considered hostile and subject to military action. The elder listened quietly, then responded through Crescent, who had volunteered to translate. "We have broken no treaties. We have made no war. We only wish to live as our ancestors lived, on land that is ours by right and by promise. Why should we give up everything because your government has decided to break its word again?" The lieutenant looked uncomfortable. "I am just delivering the message, sir. I do not make policy, but I would urge you to consider seriously. There are many soldiers and more coming. Resistance will only lead to bloodshed." "There has already been bloodshed," Running Wolf interjected, his voice hard. "Your soldiers attacked our winter camp without cause, killing women and children. Do not speak to us of avoiding bloodshed when your people have shown so little regard for ours." The meeting ended badly, with no agreement reached. The lieutenant and his men rode away, and the band was left to debate their future. Tensions ran high, with heated arguments in every council and around every fire. Harrison spoke privately with Crescent that night, holding her close as their child moved in her belly. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to raise our child in peace," she said. "I want them to know their heritage, their people, their language, but I do not want them to grow up in a war." "Maybe there is another way," Harrison said slowly, an idea forming. "What if some of us went to the reservation not to surrender but to buy time, and others stayed free, maintaining the old ways? That way, no matter what happens, the people and the culture survive." Crescent looked at him with surprise and something like hope. "You would go to the reservation, give up the freedom you have found here?" "I would go anywhere as long as I am with you," Harrison said. "And if it means our child has a chance to grow up safe, then it is worth it." They brought the idea to the elder and Running Wolf, and after much discussion, it was decided to present it to the full council. The debate was fierce and long, but eventually, a painful consensus was reached. Some, mostly the older people and those with young children, would go to the reservation. Others, the younger warriors and those who refused to be caged, would stay free for as long as they could. Running Wolf chose to stay free, as did most of the warriors. But he supported his sister's decision to go to the reservation with Harrison, understanding that she was thinking of her unborn child's safety. "We will not be apart forever," Running Wolf promised them the night before the group departed for the reservation. "I will find ways to visit to bring news, and perhaps someday things will change." "Perhaps," Crescent said, though none of them truly believed it. The reservation was everything Harrison had feared and worse. Crowded, dirty, with inadequate food and supplies, it was more prison than home. The Indian agent was corrupt, skimming from their already meager allotments, and the soldiers treated them with contempt. But Harrison and Crescent made the best of it. They built a small cabin on their allotted land, and Harrison used skills from his old life to start farming a small plot. It was back-breaking work in the poor soil, but he was determined to provide for his family. Their son was born on a cold night in November, a healthy boy with his mother's dark eyes and his father's strong features. They named him 2 Rivers, to honor both the cultures that flowed through his blood. Harrison had never known love like he felt holding his son for the first time, seeing Crescent's exhausted but joyful smile as she watched them together. Life on the reservation was hard, but they found moments of happiness. Two Rivers grew strong and curious, learning to walk and then to run, babbling in a mixture of English and Lakota. Other families on the reservation became friends, forming a community that supported each other through the difficult times. Harrison earned respect from both the Lakota families, and, surprisingly, some of the soldiers and white settlers nearby. His position as a white man married to a Lakota woman made him a bridge between the two worlds, and he often found himself called upon to translate or mediate disputes. It was exhausting work, trying to find common ground where often there was none, but he did his best. Running Wolf visited when he could, slipping onto the reservation at night to spend precious hours with his sister and nephew. He brought news from the free bands, stories of narrow escapes and successful hunts, of growing pressure and shrinking territory. Each visit felt more precious, more fragile as the military tightened its grip. 2 years passed. Two Rivers was walking and talking, bright and energetic, equally at home speaking English or Lakota. Crescent was pregnant again, and Harrison found himself hoping for a daughter this time, a little girl with her mother's grace and beauty. But the peace, such as it was, could not last. News reached them that Running Wolf's band had been attacked while camped in what they thought was a safe location. Details were scarce and conflicting, but the outcome was clear. Many were dead or captured, the survivors scattered to the winds. Crescent was devastated, unable to eat or sleep, terrified for her brother's fate. Harrison held her through the long nights as she cried, helpless in the face of her grief and fear. He sent out inquiries, called in every favor he had earned, trying to learn what had happened. Finally, 3 weeks after the attack, Running Wolf arrived at their cabin in the dead of night. He was injured, a bullet wound in his side that had been crudely bandaged, and half-starved. Harrison and Crescent brought him inside and tended to him, feeding him and cleaning his wound properly. "It is over," Running Wolf said, his voice hollow with exhaustion and grief. "Everything we were fighting for is lost, our band is destroyed, most are dead or captured. I am one of the few who escaped." "You are alive," Crescent said, tears streaming down her face. "That is what matters." "Is it?" Running Wolf asked bitterly. "What kind of life is this? Hiding, running, watching everything we love destroyed." "The kind of life where there is still hope," Harrison said firmly. "Where you can still make a difference, where the future is not yet written. You are alive, Running Wolf. As long as you are alive, your people are not defeated." They talked through the night, and slowly, Running Wolf's despair gave way to determination. He agreed to stay on the reservation, at least for a while, to heal and to be near his family. It was a surrender of sorts, but also a survival. The second child arrived in early spring, and to Harrison's delight, it was indeed a daughter. She was tiny and perfect, with Crescent's delicate features and a surprising amount of dark hair. They named her Morning Star, and she was adored by everyone who met her, especially her uncle and older brother. Life settled into a new rhythm. Running Wolf, recovered from his wounds, proved to have a talent for working with horses, and he started a small breeding program that brought in much-needed income for the family. Two Rivers started attending the reservation school, where Harrison taught English to supplement the family's income, and to ensure his son got a good education. Years passed, each with its own challenges and joys. Two Rivers grew into a thoughtful, intelligent boy who moved easily between the white and Lakota worlds, comfortable in both. Morning Star was as spirited as her mother, learning to ride almost before she could walk properly, fearless in a way that both delighted and terrified her father. Crescent and Harrison's love deepened with each passing year. They had the kind of partnership that others envied, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. They still talked late into the night like they had in those early days, still found reasons to laugh together even in hard times, still looked at each other with wonder that they had found such love against such impossible odds. The reservation slowly changed too. New policies came from Washington, sometimes better, sometimes worse, but always arbitrary and often contradictory. Harrison used his position to advocate for his adopted people, writing letters to officials, testifying when necessary, doing whatever he could to make life a little better, a little more just. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Harrison surprised Crescent with a trip away from the reservation, using saved money to take her to a proper hotel in Helena, the territorial capital. It was the first time they had been truly alone together in years, without children or responsibilities demanding their attention. "You ever regret it?" Harrison asked her as they sat together on the hotel balcony, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and pink. "Choosing this life with me? All the hardships we have faced." Crescent looked at him with such love that his breath caught. "Not for a single moment," she said. "You gave me a choice when I had none. You loved me when the world said you should not. You built a life with me, raised our children, honored my people and my ways. How could I regret any of that? I just want you to be happy," Harrison said, taking her hand. "I am happy," Crescent assured him. "Not every day, not every moment. There has been sorrow and loss and struggle. But there has also been love and joy and purpose. We have built something good, Harrison. Our children are proof of that. They are strong and smart and kind, and they will make this world better than we found it." "I hope so," Harrison said. "God, I hope so." They made love that night with the tenderness and passion of people who had grown together, rather than apart, who still chose each other every day despite everything. In the morning, they returned to the reservation and to their children, who had stayed with a neighbor family and who rushed to greet them with hugs and stories of everything they had done while their parents were away. More years passed. 2 Rivers, now a young man of 19, announced his intention to become a teacher, to help educate the next generation of Lakota children in both the old ways and the new skills they would need to survive in a changing world. Harrison was proud beyond words. Morning Star, at 15, was already breaking hearts among the young men on the reservation. She had her mother's beauty and spirit, her father's determination, and her uncle's skill with horses. She declared that she was going to start her own ranch someday, and nobody who knew her doubted she would accomplish exactly that. Running Wolf had never married, devoting himself instead to his family and his horses. He was respected throughout the reservation as a wise man who remembered the old ways and could help navigate the new. He and Harrison had become true brothers over the years, their early antagonism now just a memory they sometimes laughed about. On a warm evening in late summer, 20 years after Harrison had first found Crescent bleeding in the snow, the family gathered outside their cabin for a meal together. 2 Rivers was visiting from the boarding school, where he was completing his teaching training. Morning Star had just won a horse race at the summer gathering, beating riders twice her age. Running Wolf had brought news that one of his horses had sold for an excellent price. Harrison looked around at his family, at the life they had built together, and felt such gratitude it nearly overwhelmed him. This was not the life he had imagined when he first came west, alone and haunted by war. But it was a better life, richer and more meaningful than he could have dreamed. Crescent caught his eye across the fire and smiled, that same smile that had stolen his heart 2 decades ago. Some things never changed, and some things changed everything, and the trick was knowing the difference. That night, as they lay in bed, Crescent spoke softly in the darkness. "I want you to know something, Harrison Ford. You have been the best husband, the best father, the best man I could have imagined. Whatever comes next, whatever the future holds for our people and our children, I am grateful for every day I've had with you." "Why does this sound like goodbye?" Harrison asked, alarm rising in his chest. "It is not," Crescent assured him, snuggling closer. "I am not going anywhere. I just wanted you to know. Sometimes I think we forget to say these things, assuming the people we love know how we feel. But words matter, so I wanted to say them." "I love you," Harrison said, holding her tight. "More than I knew I could love anyone. You changed my life, Crescent. You saved me in ways that had nothing to do with healing wounds or providing shelter. You gave me purpose and hope and a reason to be better than I was." They fell asleep in each other's arms, as they had done thousands of times before, secure in their love and in the life they had built together. The years continued to unfold. Two Rivers married a young woman named Sarah, a mixed-blood teacher like himself, and they had 3 children who called Harrison and Crescent grandmother and grandfather with equal joy in both languages. Morning Star did indeed start her own ranch, marrying a hard-working young man named Daniel who shared her dreams and worked beside her to make them real. Running Wolf lived to be an old man, respected and loved, passing away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people from multiple reservations, all coming to pay respects to a warrior who had survived impossible times with grace and dignity. Harrison and Crescent grew old together, their hair turning silver, their movements slower but their love undiminished. They became elders themselves, sought out for advice and wisdom. Their marriage held up as an example of what was possible when people chose love over hate, understanding over prejudice, hope over despair. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered to celebrate, filling their home with noise and laughter and love. Harrison looked around at all the faces, seeing pieces of himself and Crescent in each of them, seeing the future they had created together. "We did good," Crescent whispered to him as they watched their youngest grandchild, a 3-year-old ball of energy, chase a butterfly through the garden. "We did better than good," Harrison replied, kissing her forehead. "We did miraculous." They lived to see the 20th century arrive, to see automobiles and electricity come to the reservation, to see their grandchildren grow and have children of their own. Through it all, they remained each other's constant, each other's home. Harrison Ford passed away on a quiet morning in the spring of 1904, surrounded by his family, with Crescent holding his hand. He was 76 years old, and he died as he had lived the last 4 decades, loved and at peace. Crescent followed him 6 months later, as though she could not bear to be separated from him for long. Their children found them appropriate in a way that the couple who had been so devoted to each other in life would be reunited quickly in death. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the valley, with markers in both English and Lakota, telling the story of a cowboy who sheltered a lost native woman and found a love that transcended every boundary their world tried to place between them. Their story was passed down through generations, a testament to the power of love, courage, and the choice to see the humanity in each other despite what the world demanded. Their descendants continued to thrive, carrying forward the best of both cultures, proving that the bridge Harrison and Crescent had built between their worlds was strong enough to last forever. And on quiet nights, when the wind blew through the valley just right, some swore they could hear laughter echoing from that hill, the sound of 2 souls still together, still in love, still defying the odds. The family Harrison and Crescent built became a cornerstone of their community. Generations of teachers, ranchers, leaders, and healers who carried forward the values their ancestors had lived by. The cabin where they had first fallen in love was preserved and eventually became a historical site, a place where people could come to learn about the complex history of the West, about love in the face of hatred, about the individuals who refused to accept that their worlds could not meet. The story of how a cowboy named Harrison Ford had found a wounded woman named Crescent Lightfoot in the snow, had sheltered her, fought for her, loved her against all odds, became legend. But to their family, it was simply the truth of how two people had chosen each other, had chosen love, and had created something beautiful from the broken pieces of their world. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy of all, not the land or the horses or the historical markers, but the simple proof that love could build bridges even when everything else tried to burn them down, that two people from different worlds could become one family, one story, one enduring testament to what was possible when hearts remained open and courage did not falter. Their love story lived on, told and retold, inspiring others to look past differences, to choose compassion over fear, to believe that even in the darkest times, love could light the way forward. Harrison and Crescent's story proved that sometimes the most unlikely love stories became the most powerful, that sometimes the greatest acts of rebellion were simply choosing to love who you loved, fully and without apology, and building a life together that honored both of your truths. In every sunset over the Montana mountains, in every laugh of their great-great-grandchildren, in every act of kindness between people who might have been enemies, the spirit of Harrison and Crescent lived on. They had taken the wild and often brutal West and carved out a space for tenderness, for partnership, for a love that refused to be defined or limited by anyone else's rules. And that, more than anything, was their gift to the world, the proof that love, real love, the kind that lasts and builds and creates, was always worth fighting for, always worth the risk, always worth everything. From a chance meeting in a snowstorm to a lifetime of devotion, from suspicion and fear to acceptance and family, from two lonely people to a legacy of love that would span generations. Theirs was a story that would never truly end as long as there were hearts willing to believe in the impossible, courageous enough to reach across divides, and devoted enough to build something lasting from the courage to simply love.